This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Welcome, everyone, to the Cal's Corner Show here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and Realmar Media. Welcome back. I am grateful to be back on the air, back to where it started all in the late 1990s, thanks to the generosity of the executive producer, Mr. Rob McConnell, longtime friend of mine. I want to remind everybody, take you back in time to the late 1990s, where Cal's Corner started. It started on the X-Zone radio show. And the way the show worked was just fantastic. Rob would call me up on the mobile phone. We'd just wing it. No script, unrehearsed. It was captured raw and live. Then when I left the United States in the year 2000, moved to Europe, lived in the beautiful city of Prague in the capital of the Czech Republic, we continued to do the show. And then I left Europe and went to India after spending 10 years in Europe. And then I worked for Daily Post newspaper and the media company there. And I did a lot of reporting, wrote thousands of articles on many different subjects there. Then I went to Daily World newspaper and Daily World television, which I still do work for and do reporting for. And of course, we continued to do shows there. And Cal's Corner appeared over the years in Europe and in India in the form of a printed column. Then, of course, there was the Kal Korff TV show, briefly Kal Korff radio show. Instead of doing all of these different things, I wanted to consolidate them. And now I'm back as Cal's Corner, named after the column. And again, the show that Rob had originally started with me in the late 1990s. And all I can say is it's good to be back. And I want to thank Rob again for this wonderful opportunity. So what is Cal's Corner exactly? Well, my name is Kal, last name is Korff, first name K-A-L, last name K-O-R-F-F. Unfortunately, my middle name is Carlton, so yes, I'm KKK. Has nothing to do with the Ku Klux Klan. It has to do with the fact that my ancestors came from Europe, from Germany, and of course the letter K is used a lot. The letter C is not used unless your last name is Christ. So it's the reason for the triple K. And Cal's Corner is a play on that K, corner being spelled with a K instead of a C. And the purpose of Cal's Corner is to cover everything from politics to the paranormal. And that's a wide variety of subjects. And we'll touch on many of them tonight and on each episode. Going forward, we will have guests from all over the world. Right now, we are broadcasting this first episode from the wonderful country of the United Arab Emirates, here in the capital city of Abu Dhabi. And I must tell you, it's one of my favorite places to be. I've enjoyed staying here again during this past week here. Been here actually a little bit longer than a week. And the reason I'm here is to take care of some business as well as launch several new books, which I'll talk about a bit later. So I've been to a total of 27 countries now on 4 different continents. And out of all the cities I've been to and places I've been to, I have to say that the United Arab Emirates is actually up there as one of the tops. And it's a fantastic city. The quality of life here is absolutely fantastic. It's truly international. You meet people from all over the world just walking around. And I can't say enough good things about it. And every time I come here, I absolutely have a great time, and I always look forward to it. So that's, again, a brief introduction of how we're doing the show, what the plan is going forward. And again, my name is Kal Korff, and this is, again, Cal's Corner here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Now, let's talk quickly, before we take a break on our first segment here, about some of the events and subjects we're going to cover. One of them is going to be, of course, the international crisis which has occurred regarding communist North Korea. Now, if you listen to the media over the last few years or days, especially in the United States, you'd swear that North Korea is not important. The focus seems to have been on the recent racial-driven riots and violence that has occurred in the U.S., and that's kind of ridiculous because what's more important is when North Korea threatens the world with a nuclear holocaust. Now, a lot of people may disagree with that, especially in the la-la liberal left, but they're not exactly grounded in reality, in my opinion. The left no longer bears the responsibility they used to have in the 1960s and 70s when you could really reason with them and they had some very good arguments. Today's left is intolerant, they're as bad as the right, and both sides are polarized. So when you have white supremacist protesters at an event causing problems, combined with people from Black Lives Matter also causing problems, they're both racist groups. They're both opposites of a spectrum. And the truth, unfortunately, gets lost somewhere in the middle. So North Korea has popped up again. This time they've said they are canceling their threat to destroy Guam. That's mighty generous of them, isn't it? So we'll talk about North Korea and a bit of a history that a lot of people don't know about and why it is that the situation is out of control today. Well, one of the key reasons happens to do with the fact that Barack Obama, when he was president for 8 years, could have done a lot more to contain communist North Korea, but he just couldn't be bothered to do so.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Is it science or is it magic? Once a magical thing has been scientifically proven, is it no longer magic? Or is magic simply the science of tomorrow? Join me, Gwilda Wiyaka, on The Science of Magic, a a syndicated radio program dedicated to combining the science and magic of today's dynamic and controversial topics to co-create new solutions. By triangulating information from today's leading experts from the scientific and magical fields, we uncover expansive and evolutionary truths you won't find anywhere else. Join us daily on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, as I interview the share thoughts with the amazing guests from both science and magic. The resulting knowledge is unprecedented. As a gift to you, the listener, past episodes can be accessed on our website free of charge at thescienceofmagic.net.
Little children aren't the only ones afraid of the dark. Millions of soldiers return from war zones with PTSD, anger, frustration, fear, and loneliness, much of which surfaces during the darkness of the night. You have the chance to change the lives of these American heroes. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us provides free MP3 players for these men and women. With a list of 3 million songs in 16 different styles, 100,000 audiobooks, and 30,000 old-time radio programs, every veteran can find something to soothe and comfort them at no cost. All our players contain an 8-hour audio program designed to help veterans fall asleep. With 1,500 plus vets now participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. Go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us help a veteran make it through the night.
Welcome back to the second segment here on Kal's Corner, here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Executive producer is, of course, the one and only Rob McConnell. Now, we were starting to talk about North Korea and the real crisis that this issue does present to the world. I cannot emphasize enough to you, regardless of what political ideologies you may hold, that North Korea is a problem that needs to be dealt with sooner than later. In fact, to be blunt about this issue, it should have been dealt with many years ago. Now, let me briefly review some history that a lot of people who talk about North Korea, especially in the mainstream media, just don't seem to bother mentioning. First of all, the history of North Korea's nuclear weapons program goes back decades. In other words, these nuclear weapons just didn't magically build themselves, neither did the rockets. What happened in the 1950s is that Joseph Stalin's regime, now this is the former Russian dictator Joseph Stalin and his successor, they cut a deal with North Korea to start training their scientists to make nuclear weapons. This is after the United States got the bright idea to station nuclear weapons in South Korea. By the time the United States had its nuclear weapons program in South Korea, that is nuclear weapons aimed at various targets, there were about 95 nukes total. That, of course, their presence there bothered the Russians. So what happened is, over the many decades, the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, it no longer exists, thankfully, signed an agreement with communist North Korea to start building reactors, they're still in use today, and to train their scientists to build nuclear weapons. In fact, we know that the engines for the rockets, which are knockoffs of Russian rockets, actually come from the Ukraine. Ukraine, to this day, builds a lot of the engines that drive the Russian missiles, including their intercontinental ballistic missiles, because Ukraine, until they gave up their nuclear weapons in exchange for a security guarantee from the United States, which is a joke now, they at one time had the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world. They had over 5,000 nuclear weapons. Now, I've written and reported on this as a journalist for many, many years. And the short version is that Russia is the country responsible for helping empower communist North Korea to develop nuclear weapons. Now, this is outside the framework of any signature it had with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the terms of which it violated. So while Russia likes to condemn the misbehavior of North Korea, it's speaking out of both sides of its mouth since it is the entity responsible for helping North Korea get to where it is today. Now, it wasn't just Russia. What happened is in the late 1980s and early 90s, the USSR imploded. It no longer exists. So North Korea was suddenly without its security blanket agreement from Russia. That's when Communist China stepped in and was happy to fill the void. You have to remember that when both the USSR and Communist China were competing against each other, they were arguing over what was the valid path to true communism. Each one was claiming that they were better communists than their rivals. The truth is, neither were very good communists. You had China eventually distance itself from its Maoist doctrine to become what it is today, which is basically a totalitarian capitalistic society. They're not genuine communists. Russia was never genuine communist either. In fact, there never has been a truly genuine communist country in the entire history of the world. It will never happen either, folks. And this includes Fidel Castro's so-called communist Cuba. So what has happened is China has used North Korea as a proxy sock puppet type state in the same way that it uses the country of Pakistan to go after India rather than confront India directly, because that wouldn't be a smart thing to do. They use Pakistan as a way to poke India in the proverbial eye. So what China does is it arms Pakistan. It supplies militants with weapons and high-tech GPS devices. Pakistan takes that equipment, trains the militants, sneaks them across the borders into India. They then kill innocent people or some of the border patrol forces. And this goes on all the time, sometimes for days in a row. There are hundreds of violations that occur every year in the so-called ceasefire zone and border between India and Pakistan, and most of it doesn't even make the news. When Pakistan opens up and fires mortars into India and kills people, it barely makes the news even in India a lot of times, and it especially does not make the news in the West and in the U.S. because nobody really cares, and that's unfortunate. So here you have China working both sides of the issue. They say that they cannot contain or control North Korea, which is simply not true. It is a blatant lie. You see, what China's real objective is to make sure that North Korea does finally develop a missile that is so powerful that it can nuke any target effectively anywhere in the world. That includes as far as the eastern coast of the United States. It absolutely includes Europe. And the Chinese want North Korea to reach this infamous milestone, because if war, God forbid, should ever break out between China and the United States, they will be able to count on North Korea to open up a second front that will give America and its allies, including Japan, even more things to worry about. China is also worried about the rise of India, because China doesn't want India to eventually replace it economically. And if things continue, although it may be 10, 15 years away, India at some point will pass China economically. And here's why. India has the world's largest population of young people. This is people who are under age 28. India has that. China's population has been shrinking because of the stupidity of the one-child policy, which has gone on for decades. In fact, the mindset of the average Chinese family is such that one child is enough. Even though legally they can now have two, that's pretty generous of the Communist Party in Beijing, right? But they are so brainwashed and conditioned socially over the decades that they don't want a second child. Plus, it's expensive by Chinese standards. So it's going to take decades to reverse what has been infanticide. That is, when you make a point to kill children. China has suffered from that policy for decades because if a second child was born, either a stiff penalty was paid, which most families cannot afford, or that child, unfortunately and very cruelly, was murdered, especially if it was a female. So India will pass China in population, guaranteed. They are on the verge of passing up China economically. That's going to happen unless India does something fundamentally stupid. In the past couple of years, ever since India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi won the election, he received more votes than any human being in the history of the human race. He has made India the number one country for foreign direct investment, greater than the United States, greater than China. That has been true now for the past couple of years. In fact, to show you how much the pendulum has started to swing against China, even the largest company in the history of business, Apple, is now making 3 separate iPhone product lines in India, not China. Foxconn, which is a Chinese company, is actually opening a couple of new factories in the United States. So things are changing. The irony of China's growth is that it is fueled and funded by money from the West. If the West didn't pay it to make cheap goods, they wouldn't have the money to build up a mighty military and become the belligerent country and regime that they have. We must remember that China is in the process of making artificial islands and then falsely claiming that the airspace and territorial space for hundreds of kilometers around these artificial islands belongs exclusively to China. They want to be able to control who goes in and out of the seas in that area, even though they've been under international sovereignty or recognized internationally for decades, because that's always been the case. China recently, last year, took its case to the UN and said, based on historical documents, this was always our territory. Well, that data was bogus. The UN was right to reject it. And of course, China rejects what the UN says because that's what China does. So what has happened is China is trying to exercise its influence in Asia. It is trying to do what it can through its proxies like Pakistan to thwart the rise of India. You can actually plot on a graph the number of incidents that occur against India, and you'll see a similarity between the incidents that occur with communist North Korea. What you're seeing now is a border standoff at a very narrow piece of territory in eastern India and China, where both militaries are practically looking at each other through their field scopes. Well, it's not a coincidence that China is acting up on India's border because it wants to distract away from North Korea. Things have heated up in North Korea, especially since Donald Trump became president of the United States, because to be blunt about this issue, he inherited a mess from Barack Obama. Now, love or hate Barack Obama, there's one thing you can say about him that is beyond dispute. Foreign policy-wise, far more so than not, this man was a disaster. And that's ironic because one of the reasons he was elected was to fix the disasters that George Bush created, his predecessor. Now, take the issue of the debt. When Obama became president, the United States was $10 trillion in debt. Obama said this was irresponsible. He's right about that. But do you know what the debt was when Obama left office? Another $10 trillion. So the United States is $20 trillion in debt. So if Obama or if Bush was irresponsible, what is Obama by doing the same thing, even though he wasn't fighting the kind of wars that Bush started? Look at his policy in Syria. The media let him off the hook for that, even though he is directly responsible for displacing hundreds of thousands of people in Syria, many of whom would be alive today if Obama had not gotten the stupid idea to interfere in Syria by cutting a deal with the Saudis and a deal with the Turks to go in there and try to engage in regime change. This was something he said he was against and would never do. And yet this is exactly what he and his then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton did once they got into power. Regime change. They did it in Libya. They tried it in Syria. It did not work. And now Syria is worse than it ever has been because of direct interference by many different countries. This includes Iran, this includes Russia, it includes the United States, and a bunch of terrorists who belong to the Islamic State, as well as Al-Qaeda and a bunch of other militant groups. But the pro-Obama media basically let Obama get away with it. They didn't hold him accountable like they did Bush for the disaster in Iraq. Clearly, it was a double standard. So what Obama did during the time he was president was he let North Korea continue to get away with its antics. He could have done a lot more. He passed a lot of sanctions against North Korea, but they didn't do any good. And he has a history of doing that. And sanctions that do no good are useless. You might as well not bother. So it was during Obama's watch that North Korea became the strongest it has ever been. Thanks to what Obama did not do, North Korea sits in the position it is today, on the brink of developing intercontinental ballistic missiles that can literally threaten the world.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here. When you know how to read a person's name, you know how the person thinks, feels, and behaves. Each letter in our name holds a key to unlock our true essence. Our name contains both our gifts and challenges in this lifetime. Mnemology science discovers personality secrets hidden in the placement of the letters of our names, including the first and last impression people remember about us. Sharon shows us how to interpret the arrangement of letters as outlined in her book, Know the Name, Know the Person. Sharon Lynn Wyeth created mnemology science after 18 years of research and testing her theories, and has supported thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. You'll enjoy Sharon's unique teachings as she shares her system to learn the gifts behind your given birth name. Even if you don't like your birth name, there are jewels in this book. If you're thinking of changing your name, ready to name your child, or wanting to get along better with others, this is the book for you. If you'd like to improve your relationships and change your life for the better, get the book today, Know the Name, Know the Person, or visit www.knowthename.com. That's www.knowthename.com.
Hello, I'm Justina Marsh, and with my dad Pete, we are going to present a new show called Too Good to Be True. Together, we are aiming to discover more truths about this world and beyond. Do you have unanswered questions about the world? Do you ever wonder about aliens, conspiracy theories, or the universe? There are many shows discussing subjects such as pyramids or UFOs, but we want to relay this information based on our own research, including from spiritual means. Hopefully, listeners will be helped with their own beliefs and will appreciate the psychic insights that add to the previous research and information. We both look forward to sharing this insight and beginning this journey with our listeners. Visit xzbn.net for more information about when to listen.
Ancient prophecies, legends, and current events indicate we're entering a high-frequency era supporting enlightenment. During expansive times, old rules fail, necessitating access to the ever-shifting currents of life for guidance. There's an ancient form of shamanism through which we can obtain the information we need. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Art School, with a great new provision for those interested in spiritual evolution and personal empowerment. Galactic Shamanism, Art of the Ancients, Key to Tomorrow, is an upcoming series of leading-edge online affordable classes designed to guide and support you and your family during these times of transition. Embrace the magic. Empower your life. Study Galactic Shamanism at findyourpathhome.com.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Welcome back to the third segment of Kal's Corner here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. So, to wrap up the issue of communist North Korea, again, Donald Trump inherited a mess. He wasn't exaggerating. He was right about that. Because Obama didn't do enough, and he should have, we are in the situation that exists today. North Korea will continue with its rogue nuclear weapons program. It wants to develop weapons that can reach almost anywhere on the planet. China supports them despite their official denials to the contrary. It's just typical lies out of Beijing. And this is going to come to a head, folks. Both sides cannot win. Either North Korea is going to have to stand down, which means China is going to have to change its mind as well, or it means that the United States will have to stand down. And if it should do that and effectively surrender, it means that the world will be at the whims of a tyrant and a proxy of communist China. No sane president would allow that to happen, and U.S. doctrine, independent of Trump, says they will never allow communist North Korea to reach that milestone. This issue will come to a head this year, at the latest early next year if both sides stall out. I predict that both sides will not find common ground. And there's a rather interesting development that people are thinking of once again on this issue as we wrap it up. Thanks to documents that have been put out there by WikiLeaks, we now know that communist China a few years ago actually was seriously considering abandoning North Korea and supporting the reunification of North and South Korea under the government of South Korea to reunify the countries in exchange for the United States to remove all of its military from the area. Now, that's something the Chinese have always wanted. They've never loved the fact that U.S. soldiers are stationed there. So here is the leadership in Beijing of the Communist Party seriously considering the idea that they will pull all support from communist North Korea, support reunification, let South Korea run everything as a unified Korea. The U.S. pulls out its military, everything. It's demilitarized the whole Korean peninsula. And then China, by default, becomes the region's trading kingpin, economic giant. They would anyway, just because of their physical location. And that's something that Chinese today are probably still considering. Now, if I were the leadership of communist North Korea, I'd be a little worried about that. I would say, well, I'm not on very solid ground here. But yet, they're not on solid ground anyway, because if Beijing wants that regime gone, it's gone. If they want to support it, they'll remain in power. So this is going to be interesting to see which side stands down. Trump has told China he's going to delay sanctions against them if they show signs of progress in helping defang, disarm, or contain North Korea. China is seriously rethinking its steps because at the end of the day, with them being a totalitarian type system that calls itself a communist system, they're actually totalitarian capitalists. At the end of the day, they want to make money. And that is, of course, how modern wars are fought, much more so with bombs and guns. They're fought with dollars and economics now. So that's where things are on the international front. That is the number one story, and it's far more important than whatever racial tension is going on in the United States, which has been there before Trump was president, and it will continue, of course, after he is out of the White House, whenever that is. So now that we've dealt with the international thing, let's turn to some domestic stuff in the United States. Yes, there was the riots that occurred in the white supremacist get-together. This rally had been called for about a month ago. There wasn't a lot of people attending it. To call it a success would be a stretch. And you have to question the sanity of officials who allow this to happen and the judge that gave it the green light. One of the things that does not make sense in the United States is you have this Constitution that says you've got the right to freedom of speech. Nothing wrong with that. It's a beautiful concept. God bless America for it. But the right to freedom of speech does not protect you if you stand in a theater and yell fire. Well, it's obvious it doesn't, because you can cause a panic. People can hurt themselves. It's not protected. Hate speech is not protected free speech. So, since the courts have ruled on that many, many years ago, why then would a judge or a city allow a get-together of people who are going to make a point to spread hatred and racial prejudice and intolerance? Why would they let them do that, since hate speech is not protected by the freedom of speech clause? It makes no sense. Just like it makes no sense to give the American Nazi Party the right to march down Main Street and chant slogans of death to Jews. It doesn't make sense. It's not logical. What the United States should do is pass laws that ban this kind of behavior so that groups like this cannot get permits to hold their events. And if they're not allowed to hold their events, logic tells you that other hate groups like Black Lives Matter, which is a racist group on the other side of the spectrum, they won't be able to attend those white supremacist gatherings because they won't be taking place. And then the obvious result of that would be peace, because there's no event to get violent over, unless they want to go stage their own event and throw a violent affair. When I lived in Europe, because I'm fascinated by history, and World War II happens to be one of the eras that I've studied a lot on, and I've actually got a series of books coming out, which I'll talk about in a little bit about World War II. The Czech Republic, which used to be known as Czechoslovakia, was, of course, occupied by Hitler and the Nazis only because the countries of France and Italy and England sold out the Czechs to the Germans, let Hitler have what was then called Bohemia in exchange for peace in our time. And of course, anybody with an IQ of over 10 understood that there was never going to be peace in our time, that you don't give in to a tyrant like this. But this is what the British and the French especially did, letting fascist dictator Mussolini broker the agreement. The Czechs had no say in it. Hitler was given parts of Czechoslovakia. Then he formally annexed the country. And as he said, wipe Czechoslovakia out from the face of the map. It was then called the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, absorbed into essentially his German Empire, like Austria was. So as I was going into these stores who sold antiques from World War II, now they would also sell things from the communist era when the communists ruled brutally over Czechoslovakia. They would, of course, sell a lot of Nazi memorabilia. This included helmets, daggers, medals, things like that, lifted from dead soldiers or wherever they came from. But what was interesting when you went to look at these original artifacts from World War II is the swastika symbol would have a piece of tape over them. The reason they had that is because Czech law said you're not allowed to display symbols of hatred. So here was a store that sold historic antiques to collectors. The swastika was covered with a piece of tape. You had to lift it up, the tape. You have to lift up the tape to see what was under there, and then you decided you wanted to buy it or not. And I thought that was an interesting law because symbols of hatred were banned. That's the way it should be. And I don't buy the argument that that crimps somebody's free speech. If hate speech is not protected under the laws of free speech, then of course you should ban symbols of hatred. What I found hypocritical about Czech law, however, was that the Communist Party symbol was not banned. In fact, it was amazing to me to see the Communist Party have people in parliament even when I lived there. It's like the Czechs didn't get the memo or learn their lesson from history that they should have banished the Communist Party entirely. And of course, the Communist Party, reinventing themselves, changed their symbol to a dove holding some cherries in its beak to represent supposed peace, even though communism has never been about peace. So if you want to stop the insanity in the U.S., as epitomized by this recent white supremacist get-together, you simply have judges or officials who deny these people permits, and then they can't get together to cause their problems. It couldn't be more simple to solve. But as America keeps showing over and over again, sometimes the simplest things are things they just don't bother solving. And it reminds me of something that President Abraham Lincoln famously said a long time ago, over 100 years ago. The short version of what he said is that America will never be defeated from the outside. He worried that it would be defeated from the inside. And as an American, I will tell you, especially having lived outside my own country now for 17 years, I left in the year 2000. It's now, of course, 2017. It pains me to see what goes on in the country, what I hear from my fellow Americans by being in constant contact with them. The country I left no longer exists. The people that I love and cherish, they're still there. Many of them are still alive, thank God. And they still believe in the stuff that I grew up with. But there's a new generation now that feels like everything's owed to them, like they don't want to work for it. They don't understand what communism is, what socialism is. They throw these terms around and they don't even know what they're talking about. I have liberals and progressives telling me how they hate people. Well, wait a minute. If you hate someone, you're not liberal and you're not progressive. You're intolerant and you're an extremist. Hatred means what it does, or it means nothing at all. So what I saw, because I just moved to Europe in the year 2000, there was, of course, this presidential election where George Bush became the president, even though Al Gore had won the majority of the popular vote. I had many European friends ask me, what kind of system do you have? What kind of democracy is this when most of the people vote for one guy, but the other guy ends up winning? Well, it makes no sense. And I said, well, at least we get to vote directly for the guy. You guys have parliamentary democracy. You don't vote directly for the guy. You vote for the party. My party, right or wrong. And I've never been a my party, right or wrong type. But I'll tell you, it was in the late 1990s that I quit the Democratic Party. I realized during the second term of President Bill Clinton that the Democrats have lost it. And since I was never a Republican, I concluded both parties have lost it, and that what America needs, especially 17 years later, is a viable third-party alternative. And if there was any case for it, it was this last presidential election. Just look at the number of people that Donald Trump ran against. He ran against approximately 24 candidates. It was the best that the Republican Party could throw at him, and he beat them all by a margin of 2-1. Ted Cruz was the second closest guy, and he was 50% down. George Bush, Jeb Bush, he never polled above 10%. So there was no showdown between another Bush and a Clinton. And then look at Clinton. If the Democratic Party had not stacked the deck in her favor and cheated and was corrupt, and that's the reason their former president, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, resigned in disgrace after being outed by WikiLeaks, Bernie Sanders would have won. In fact, Bernie Sanders was the best candidate for the Democrats. But there were just enough of them, the Clintonites and the Obamites, that didn't get the memo and put cronyism first. And as a result of it, Hillary stands, as I've written in articles before, as the greatest loser politically in American history. So we'll be back with our final segment and wrap this up and continue talking about American politics before we switch to the paranormal. I'm Kal Korff. We'll be back.
The The Earth is under ever-increasing pressure from untenable lifestyles and growing populations. Yet, viable answers seem in short supply. What if I told you there's an ancient form that can empower you to take charge of your life? What if your entire family could be enfolded and supported by life itself, finding safe passage through challenging times? I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Art School, with great news: an upcoming series of leading-edge online affordable classes based in an ancient form of shamanism, easily learned and used by your entire family. Galactic Shamanism, Art of the Ancients, Key to Tomorrow are a series of online adult and children's lessons instructing your entire family on natural law, how to cooperate with and be supported by the powers of the universe. Visit findyourpathhome.com to find these unique and powerful classes.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Are you curious? Do you want to learn more about how the world works and have fun at the same time? Study coincidences with me, Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD, on my Connecting with Coincidence radio show, here on the XZBN network. Listen to Jungians theorize, statisticians randomize, true believers evangelize, while I categorize. I dance to the rhythm of coincidences. People who experience me see more of them. Maybe something on the show matches a thought in your mind. Let us know. Expand your mind to the weirdness happening around you. Synchronicity spoken here, there, and everywhere. For more information, put Connecting with Coincidence in your search engine and find my website, my social media sites, and my blog.
What is truth? Historically, we viewed things as either being true or false. Now, as we enter a more expansive era, we find the question is not, is it true, but rather, how true is it? I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, host of The Science of Magic Radio, a syndicated, internationally broadcast radio program dedicated to uncovering this ever-expanding truth. Join me daily on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, as I interview today's leading experts from the fields of science and magic to uncover the hidden truth between the lines drawn in the sand. What we unearth in our discussions is not only amazing, but totally unprecedented. You won't want to miss a single episode. In service to our listeners, past episodes can always be found on our website with our compliments at thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome back to the final segment of Cal's Corner here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, produced again by the one and only Rob McConnell. So we were talking about problems in the U.S. Of course, there was a big news regarding the racial riots, but again, compared to North Korea, that's small potatoes, and this racism thing is so easily fixed. Let me share with you a real story real quickly. I saw Barack Obama in person when he gave his first speech after he won the White House. He went to Prague, and I went with a friend of mine named Bill Marriott. A lot of people listening to this broadcast know Bill. We were best friends. He voted for Barack Obama. I refused to vote for Barack Obama, and I did not vote for John McCain either, because I told Bill Marriott both parties have lost it. And Bill told me, Cal, don't you want to be part of electing the first black president in history? I said, no, Bill, that's racism. I don't care what color he is. That's genetics. I care about what he's going to do. And he said, he's going to fix everything, even cure cancer, so to speak. And I knew better. So when I heard Barack Obama say things that he was going to get rid of the deficit, that he was going to solve problems in the Middle East, that all we had to do largely was just apologize and try to listen to the enemies and so on, I was even saying on the episodes of Cal's Corner on X-Zone at the time that he was not going to do any of this. I also predicted that the healthcare initiative would be over-engineered, that it would not be done right. And I knew that because I lived in Europe where they had a fantastic healthcare system where it was very simple. You just paid a flat fee no matter who you were, didn't matter whether you had a condition or not. And then you could use this one card anywhere, okay? And then if you wanted your dental covered, because good dental health is part of good health, duh, hello, you paid €5 extra and you were covered anywhere in the European Union, which at that time was over 24 countries. Very simple. It worked. I benefited from it. And I knew darn well that the United States would never do it right, and that what the Democrats were promising was just nonsense, and that they were basically drunk with power. And I also told people that in a couple years they'll start losing their supermajority. And of course, the Democrats have now been 0 and 4 in their last 4 elections, and it's all their fault. And things are going to get worse very shortly because Hillary Clinton is coming out with her book called What Happened? It's not what happened, ? She's going to tell you what happened. In there, she's going to say that it basically was not her fault. She'll admit to a few token tactical errors, but she won't admit that basically she blew it, that she didn't have a focused message, that instead she was trying to pander to everybody, which doesn't work, and that she was the worst candidate that the Democrats could have put forward because she didn't really represent real change. As I covered in previous newspaper articles I'd written during the campaign, Hillary entered the election. Remember that speech she gave at the United Nations when she accepted that award for all the accomplishments she had achieved as Secretary of State, which was laughable since she couldn't even name any. She was asked in 6 different occasions, please tell us your top accomplishments. She couldn't list any. She entered that presidential contest with the highest distrustful rating of any of the candidates. She maintained that rating up through the night she lost the election. And I was one of the few journalists who predicted Trump would win. People thought I was being biased. No, I was listening to what people were saying. And it was obvious to me that Hillary didn't represent real change. She represented more chump change. And Trump, I said in a long article and in a radio show I'd done, that he was not qualified to be president. He didn't have the right temperament. He didn't have the experience. And that this something is better than, anybody or Clinton is not the right way to do it. And again, if you look at the dynamics here, out of a population of some 320 million people in the U.S., if you're going to tell me with a straight face that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump was the best that the American people could come up with, all I can tell you is you deserve the misery that you vote for. You get what you vote for. As I've said over and over and over, democracy is like bodybuilding. You get out of it what you put into it. It's kind of obvious. So now I find out today that Bernie Sanders, God bless him, is about to introduce in Congress this so-called single-payer initiative. And my reaction is, that's great, but where have you been this whole time? Why has it taken the Democrats years and losing everything to say, maybe we need single payer? Hello? They should have done that from the beginning. Because as I said many years ago, and I wasn't the only one doing it, had Obamacare been done right, it wouldn't be in the mess it is now. I said years ago that it will become unraveled and start to show its true colors of how dysfunctional it always was as he skates out of office. And that's exactly what has happened. Obama's gone. Everyone else has to clean up his mess, and that's independent of the mess the Republicans are throwing in there because they don't believe in the idea that health care is a universal right. And I disagree with that. I think universal health care is a human right. Free speech is a human right. Freedom of press is a human right. There's a list that is admirable, and health care belongs on it. So how dare any legislator try to mess with what is arguably a universal human right? Why don't we just copy what Europe does? If it works and they figured it out, why should we be debating anything? Why should we reinvent a wheel that was invented and working fine a long time ago? The answer is we shouldn't. We should just do it. So Hillary's going to roll out her book. She's going to blame people who hated the idea of a female president. She's going to blame women who hated the idea of a female president for her loss. She's going to blame FBI Director Comey, former FBI Director Comey. She's going to blame the Russians, of course. Anybody but her, because the Clintons are infamous for this. It's always somebody else's fault. It's always a vast conspiracy of some kind, and that's what the Clintons would like you to believe. You have to remember that Bill Clinton stood before the world and said, I did not have sex with that woman. He named Miss Lewinsky. And then it was only after the FBI did the DNA analysis and said, Mr. President, we're going to announce that there's a match. He then admitted to his own wife, if you believe her, that yes, he had cheated on her and that he had lied. And then he gave that famous press conference, I remember seeing it, where he says the reason he lied was to protect himself. Well, at that point, as an American, when I saw that, I thought, you're not worthy of being president. How dare you put yourself before the country? If you're president, you put the country first. You don't put yourself first. And it was at that point, plus the rest of his track record, as he was president, that I thought, well, I won't support the Democratic Party anymore because they're certainly not the Democrats that I grew up with, where the party was great. They cared about civil rights, about getting out of Vietnam, about doing the right stuff. That was no longer reflected true under Bill Clinton. In fact, there were a couple of studies that were done, including by Princeton, where they analyzed the congressional track record and voting record going back decades. And this study concluded that the United States basically became an oligarchy during Clinton's presidency. Now, Democrats will say, no, that's not true. It had to be during Reagan because he was pro-big business. Well, there's a difference between being pro-big business and then taking the years to actually change the dynamics of the government versus Clinton, who was in the pocket of large companies to the point that when they held events like the World Trade Conference event in Seattle, he actually took requests from large companies and asked the NSA to bug the rooms of the Japanese delegations in Seattle and asked them, what do you want? What kind of intelligence do you want? He was actually shopping out the services of the National Security Administration, whose job is to eavesdrop on the world, including Americans. They do it illegally all the time. They've done it especially under the Obama administration. Nobody held them accountable. Nobody cares. That's the way they operate. So Bill Clinton would literally contact Boeing. He would contact the American automakers and say, what intelligence can we get for you? And they'd actually cut a deal, and it would then be passed on to the companies, this intelligence, and would give American companies an edge. And you can Google this stuff. I'm not just making it up. It's not some conspiracy thing or anything like that. So, as I mentioned before, in Cal's Corner, we cover everything from politics to the paranormal. This does not mean that every episode will cover both subjects or 3 or 4 in between. There's going to be no pattern. It depends on what's important at the time. We could have a whole show on a specific UFO case or paranormal case. Another episode could be about Donald Trump or whatever. But the fact that we cover everything from politics to the paranormal is a wide scope. And one of the things that I promise to you is that one of the great things about facts is that you can independently check them yourself. And hopefully we will give you enough facts that you don't have to just take my word for it. In fact, please don't. Go ahead and check it yourself. You can contact me at Kal Korff at xcbn.net. Okay? I'm happy to read your emails, take your suggestions, and of course I'll be having guests on the show that cover a wide variety of subjects as we start to get in this, and it's again great to be back. So I hope you'll tune in every week and listen to the show. Please send in your suggestions for the shows and your questions. I'll be happy to take them and answer them on the air, and also give you credit for the question as well. And I hope you'll join me, because what matters is that people communicate and understand each other. That is what ultimately makes or breaks a society, is either real communication or a lack of. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you again next week.